Hey there, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to touch base really quickly. Really nice job on the guided notes so far through a couple of modules. You're doing really well. Seem to have a pretty good grasp of the material. There are a couple of concepts that can be a little bit tricky, and I just wanted to make sure that people had a really good understanding of them. The first one is that difference between operant and respondent conditioning. And the distinction that I find helpful for me is when I'm trying to think about the difference between the two of them is that if we're dealing with respondent conditioning, the behavior is always reflexive. And if we think about what that means, it means that the organism or the person doesn't have any choice about whether they engage in that behavior. It's something that biologically just happens when being faced with a stimulus. Okay, so if we think about those things that are kind of reflexive, that can be thing like we think about the obvious one, right? That when we're sitting on a table in the doctor's office and the doctor hits us on the knee and the foot comes up. We can't control whether that foot comes up no matter how much we might want to do it. Okay, other things like that, like we can't control whether our heart rate increases in the face of certain stimuli or our blood pressure increases. We can't control an involuntary jerk away at some physical pain, okay? So if we're looking to make that distinction between operant and respondent conditioning, the place that I would start is this behavior reflexive, or does the person or the organism have some control over whether they engage in it? And we know there are lots of other differences too, right? So with respondent conditioning, it's about antecedent pairing. It's that kind of stimulus pairing, all things that are happening before the behavior. It's not about consequences, whereas operant conditioning is really, it's probably wrong to say it's all about consequences, but it's primarily about consequences. It's about what happens after the behavior. Respondent conditioning is all about what happens before behavior. Operant conditioning is what happens before and after behavior, that three-term contingency, okay? And again, respondent, reflexive, the organism has no control whether they engage in the behavior. Operant, the organism does have control. They can choose whether they're going to engage in that behavior. So if you're looking to tease out whether something is operant or respondent, think about that. Can the organism control whether they're going to engage in that behavior? The second concept that I want to make sure that people really have a good understanding of is thinking about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. By and large, everyone did a really good job with positive reinforcement. Something's added to the environment after behavior happens, and as a result, that behavior is more likely to happen in the future, right? So we've got something added to the environment, behavior goes up. The one where people tend to struggle is negative reinforcement, right? And I think that word negative tends to trip people up sometimes. So if we think about operation and effect, the negative refers to the operation. In negative, something is removed from the environment. You can think of negative subtract. Something is subtracted from the environment after behavior happens. And here's the tricky part. And as a result, the future frequency of that behavior increases, right? Anytime we use the word reinforcement, we've got behavior increasing. So avoid falling into the trap of thinking that when we're using the word negative reinforcement, we're pushing behavior down. We're not. The negative refers to something being removed from the environment. Reinforcement refers to behavior happens more in the future. So we think about, an example of what that might be. There's something unpleasant, something aversive that's going on in the environment. You engage in some kind of behavior and it stops that from happening. It removes it. You're more likely to engage in that behavior in the future. The sort of everyday example is for those of you that wake up to an alarm clock or you have an alarm set on your phone to tell you to get up. That alarm starts going off. That's aversive, right? You don't enjoy that sound. You don't like that sound. You don't want that sound to continue. So what do? You reach over and you hit the snooze button. And what happens? The alarm sound stops. It's removed from the environment. The negative is the removal, right? It's subtracted from the environment. That noise is no longer happening. And as a result, when the alarm is going off, you're more likely to hit the snooze button in the future. Okay, so that's really when we think about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, negative removed, reinforcement, so critical. When we use the word reinforcement, behavior in the future always goes up. So I hope that's helpful and keep up the great work. Thanks, everyone.